Hey everyone, it's TK Friday. Today it's something a little bit different. The title of this episode is Exploring Options. Stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. Well, it's that time of the week again, TK Friday, my favorite day, and I hope it is yours too. Today we'll be working on this image by Steve Director. Thanks Steve for letting us use your image, and you can download this image. I'll leave a link to my Dropbox where you can download this image and follow along with me. By the way, I'll give you two versions, the original DNG RAW file, and then also a JPEG file, which will be a little bit smaller. So you could download them both or one or whatever you'd like. By the way, if you don't yet own the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can purchase it. There's training videos that you can get, the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. And if you use my promo code DK15, you'll save an additional 15% off anything you purchase. I make a small commission and it helps out my channel. And when you do that, I appreciate it. And I thank all of you that have purchased the panel using my promo code and those who are planning on doing that in the future. So thank you very much. All right, then, let's get started. When Steve contacted me through email, he sent me this message. This is just a portion of it. He said, Dave, here is a landscape image that is very different from the ones you have been working. It does involve a relatively complex selection. I would sure like to see how you work on this one. I have really enjoyed all of your TK videos. Well, thank you, Steve. I enjoy making these, and I thank everyone for watching them. And I hope everyone out there is learning something new about the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. Also, I want to thank all of you for leaving comments and questions. It really does me good to hear what you think and if you're learning anything. Plus, it also helps me to come up with new tutorials by getting your feedback. Anyway, Steve was really right. There's a lot of tricky selections on here, but you know, the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, I think it can really help us out, as well as selections in Photoshop. You know, Photoshop is such a powerful editing tool. This is a really cool image, and I love all the trees and the gnarliness of it. And we have a subject over here. Now, you may want that subject in the image. You may not want it. Now, remember, this episode is all about options, so it's going to be a little different, but we will get to editing this. But we have this photographer over here, which is kind of nice. It kind of shows the scale of the tree, you know, next to the subject here. So that's kind of cool. And then we have this tree with all this really cool texture and these roots, and that's all really nice. Do we like these roots over here? These are questions we're asking ourselves. Do we want this photographer in the image? Do we want to simplify the image? Again, these are all options that I'll address in this tutorial. And do you want this image in color? Is there enough color here to make it interesting, or do we want it in black and white? But these are the type of questions we should be asking ourselves. You know, when we sit down in front of our computer and we look at the image and we say, wow, what am I going to do with this? Now, I have the linear profile in here, so it looks very flat. With an Adobe color profile on it, it looks like this. It looks a little more lively. But I like to start from flat because I like to take full control of my editing process. And I think in the long run, you will get better edits. You make all your own decisions because after all, you are the one that's in charge of this editing process. And now back to the options. You know, do you want to process in color? Do you want it in black and white? Is there enough color here to, you know, give you interest? Or would it look really good in a great looking high contrast black and white? Whatever, we don't know. Now, I will be processing this in color, but I'm going to explore other options. Again, that's the name of this tutorial, you know, exploring options. And I'll also show you a great way of using the TK8 plugin for Photoshop to help you with this process. So even at the end of your editing session, if you're not quite sure which way you want to go, I'm going to show you how to have some peace of mind and come back to it all later and then with a fresh mind. And sometimes it's good to go, you know, go a couple days away from it and come back to it because you might have a whole new fresh perspective. And when you have these different options available to you that I'm going to show you today, then you can come back and make a great decision of how you want to finish your masterpiece. So this is as flat and as linear as you can get it, and I love it. But after my adjustments, we end up looking like this. I just did some basic minor adjustments. You know, the exposure, 0.05, hardly anything there, right? No contrast. Reduced the highlights a little bit, opened up the shadows, set a white point and a black point, added a slight amount of texture due to the tree. I didn't want to go too overboard because I didn't want to mess up this sky. The sky's kind of soft and I kind of like it. And I'm going to work further on that in Photoshop. And I'll be doing something a little different in there, so don't miss anything. And then I gave it a slight clarity bump, and that was about it. And the only other thing I did was in HSL, brought up the blue and the aqua just a tiny little bit, because I'm thinking if I'm going to keep color, well, that little bit of blue in here, it'd be nice to be able to at least recognize it. And that was it. And next up, I'll see you in Photoshop. But to get into Photoshop, and I'm sure all of you know how to do that, I just right-click on the image, go to Edit In, and Edit in Photoshop 22. I already have the image in there, so I'll see you there now. And here we are in Photoshop, fresh out of Lightroom, and we're ready to go. The first thing I want to do is set myself up for success. And what I mean by that is I like to save out some selections if I need them, and in Photoshop, it's pretty easy to select out a sky and a subject. Now, originally, I tried selecting out this tree, and as Steve said, man, that was almost impossible. So I thought, oh, is there a better way of doing it? And yeah, there was. All you have to do is come here to this icon, select sky, and when you do, you'll see you get a really nice selection of the tree and these roots here. And it does a really nice job. And then what I did from there was I went and clicked on this icon here to edit selection. And now we can see our selection. Now, you can see there's some areas of the tree that are not quite selected properly. So there's a really cool tool in here called the burn tool. So I click on that and get myself a decent sized brush, and I just start burning. It doesn't have to be perfect. You'd never notice anything. At least for the adjustment I'm doing, and you'll see that adjustment here shortly coming up. But it's only looking for shadow tones, and the exposure's at 50%, so I'm just getting those tones. And like again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's just go along here like so, and get that. And even these roots right here. Okay, and then we can, the sky back here, we can do the opposite of burning, and that is what? Dodging. Now we're actually dodging our mask, okay? And so I'm just going to clean up the edges around these trees a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, because you'll see I'm going to make a special adjustment and this will work out just fine. I'm just cleaning up some little areas. Okay, just like that. So once you're sure you got everything, and again, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just come back over to the edit selection and click save. We'll save this out as a channel. Let's call it sky and click OK. And now you see that sky is living in the channels where we can use later. And now what we need to do is, and this is very important, we have to come here and load this back up as a selection by clicking this. And now we still have that sky selected. You don't see it, but you see the marching ants, or not the marching ants, but this selection indicator, which kind of looks like marching ants. And I guess that's why Tony did that. I never realized that till now. But anyway, so we do have marching ants. We just don't see it here. We see it here, but that's an indicator that selection is made. Now, what we need to do is, and this is very important, you have to click invert. And when we do, now we're selecting the tree and all the foreground areas. And now we can just come right here and click this save selection icon. And now we'll give it a name. We'll call it foreground. And click OK. And that saves that as a channel. So now we have sky and foreground. And then later when we need them, we can access the My Channels icon and the TK8 Multi-Mask panel and use them to our benefit. And now take notice, we still have a selection because we have the selection indicator telling us that. We don't see the marching ants in the image, but we know we have a selection. Now you can deselect that selection by clicking right here. And now, if you've been watching my videos for a while on TK Fridays, you know I like to add contrast and balance at the beginning of my edit. It's a great starting point, and it kind of grounds you to start looking at the image and seeing what it needs after you've balanced it out and added some contrast to it. It is relatively balanced, so it's going to be mainly contrast. So I'm going to come up here to the Luminosity Mask icon and click on it. And my new technique is to go to mids 3, and it's been working out really well for me. And let me know if it's been working out for you too. I'd really love to hear from you. And then we're going to output that to a color grading tool. And that mids 3 is basically acting as a clipping protection so we don't clip our highlights or shadows. And it works really well in all my tests. You know, I have had no problems whatsoever with clipping. I like to start with a highlight adjustment, so I'm going to click on this white block and start to move my highlight slider to the right, and I'm looking for the lighter areas to get a little bit lighter. Not too much, but see, everything's getting a little lighter in there, and I think that's good there. And next I want to darken up my shadows, so I'm going to click on this black block and start to drag this slider to the left. That'll darken my shadow areas. If I move it to the right, it'll lighten them. And sometimes you want to lighten them. In my case, I want more contrast, so I'm going to move it to the left. I would lose contrast if I moved it to the right. So I'm going to move it to the left. I don't want to go too far, but something like that. Let's take a look. Here's the before and here's the after. But look at the big change already. And now I want to work on the midtone. So let's click on the midtone. Now with the midtones, I decide, do I want the image lighter or darker? Let's try darker first. I think that's the wrong way. Yeah, that's the wrong direction for me. I'm going to go lighter. I just want to lighten those midtones up. And I think like right around here. Now let's take a look. Here is the before and here's the after. Now you can go back and revisit the shadows and highlights if you want to, but I think I am good to go. I apologize if you were looking for a roadmap at the beginning of this image, but this was a little different type of an edit, and I was talking about some other different things about the options, and I want to get to that shortly here, so I kind of didn't do that, but I'll get back to that probably on the next video. And speaking of options, what is my next step? What am I going to do? Well, what really speaks out to me with this old gnarly tree, driftwood, whatever you want to call it, it looks like it can use some nice texture, and I'm thinking a clarity action would really work well here. So come to the TK actions and let's find clarity. See if I have it. Yeah, right here in red. It helps to color code your actions. High pass defaults at 10 pixels, but I bumped it up to 40, and I felt that was a good place to be, because now I'm bringing out some really nice texture, and I just go by what my eye likes. And so I click OK. And now we have texture over the entire image, which is not what I want. Now let's take a look. Here is the before, and here is the after. I don't like what it's doing in the clouds. I want these clouds actually to be softer, but I'll show you how I'm going to handle that. But first, let's deal with this tree in the foreground. What I need to do is just apply it to the tree in some of the foreground, not all the foreground. Like I only want it on the sand up here, but not on the sand and water back in here. So how am I going to do that? Well, if you recall back at the beginning of the Photoshop edit, I set myself up for success by saving out 2 channels of sky and foreground. We're going to use those now, or we're going to start using the foreground. So I'm going to exile this color grading tool. I'm going to click my channels. I'm going to load that foreground. And remember, I only want it on these trees and these roots, but in this area down here, but not all this area. So I'm going to combat this in a different way here. And here's how I'm going to do it. This is a unique circumstance, and sometimes you have to think on your seat as you're editing. Okay, so what I did was I outputted this to a black mask painting through a selection. And what I'm going to do is paint my clarity adjustment on. Now I'm going to get I do have a white brush. The panel sets me up with a white brush. I'm painting at 100% opacity with a fairly large brush here. And I just want to paint that clarity adjustment on that tree. See that, how that beautifully just goes on the tree? It's all hand painted. And I'm going to come down into here. And now I'm going to make my brush smaller and just paint this area of the tree. Okay, down in here and here. And I'm being careful around this area because I don't want to get that area, but I think I can just paint right in here. I'm going to handle these tough roots in here a different way. But here I'm just going to go ahead and paint on because it's pretty easy to do. And I also want it on this foreground up in here, on this sandy area, because there's some texture in here. I don't want it on the smoother sand back in here, but in here I don't mind that little bit of texture, and on the bottom of these roots. But I have a problem when I get to all these roots in here. But up in the sky, all the area in the sky is protected, right, with my mask. So I'm just going to paint like that. And I still have to get this area right in here, and I'll show you how I'll do that. But let's take a look. Here's the before, and here's the after. I'm not going to apply clarity to these roots because they're kind of going out of the frame, and I don't want to draw attention to them. But I want all this nice texture in this area here. If you want to see what your layer mask looks like, you can click this icon with the 2 arrows on it, and you can see it. Now, these roots are in the sky, so it did a really nice job selecting these. I'm going to go ahead and click this again, and now we're back to our image. Now, let me show you how I tackle these roots in the water, because remember, I want to keep the water untouched. I don't want clarity on the water or this sandy area and water area up in here, but I do want it on these roots, and this was a challenge. So I'm done with this part of the mask, and you notice I still have a selection. I'm going to deselect this by clicking right here, and that selection goes away. And now what I'm going to do is get the object selection tool, and I just want to grab around this area all around in here and see what kind of a job it does. And as you can see, it does a beautiful job of selecting that. Oh, and by the way, I was in the lasso mode to do that, okay? So that's important. And now what I need to do is get a white brush. So I'm just going to click on this icon right here to get a white brush. And I still have 100% opacity. I still have my layer mask selected. And now watch, all I need to do is, I don't have to paint up here, it's already done, right? But I can just come in these areas and paint on this clarity adjustment. Now, you see the marching ants. You can hide them by clicking right here, and that'll hide the ants. But you notice we still have a selection. But now I can just come in here and paint without worrying about getting in the water or any of the other areas. Okay, so just like that. And now let's take a look. Here is the before, and here's the after. So see how nicely that has done that? And if you want to take a look at your mask, click that double arrow icon again on the CX or combo panel, and you can see where we added to the mask itself. So that was a challenge, and like I said, I had to think on my seat for that one. Next, I'm going to tackle the sky. I want to actually do a reverse clarity up here. Now, I can't use this clarity action because this clarity action adds clarity. I need another type of a clarity that's going to remove clarity, and to do that, I'm going to use the camera raw filter. To use the camera raw filter, I can't send like adjustment layers into it. I can only send pixel layers, and I don't have a pixel layer, so I need to make a pixel layer. I need to stamp all these layers into a pixel layer, and to do that, it's simple. Click this icon right here, and it will stamp all your layers into a pixel layer. Now, I think it's a good idea to make this into a smart object, just in case you need to make a readjustment. So to do that, all you need to do is click right here, and it'll turn that pixel layer into a smart object. Before I send that into Camera Raw, there's something very important here. You notice I still have a selection, right? And if I click this icon here, you can see there's my selection. If I were to send this into Camera Raw right now, it would only apply the reverse clarity to these tree roots, which is not what I want, right? So very important, deselect your selection before you send it in, or you're not going to be too happy. All right, so we got the smart object, and we have a button right here, ACR, Adobe Camera Raw. Click this, and this sends us into Adobe Camera Raw. Now, inside of Adobe Camera Raw, in the basic section here, you'll find clarity down here. Now, I like the clarity better in the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, the action. To me, it's a much, I don't know, it's a much more desirable clarity adjustment. I'll drag this to the right and watch the clarity. See the clarity in the tree? It's really harsh and strong, you know, and even at a reduced amount. So I really like the clarity action better in the TK8 panel. However, for reverse clarity, the action doesn't do reverse clarity unless somebody out there knows how it can. I don't think it can. I'm going to take the clarity and start to move it to the left. And you notice how I'm taking clarity out of the entire image. But I'm just looking at this sky. I'm just looking for a nice smooth sky to offset this textured, you know, tree, driftwood, whatever you want to call it. And I took mine down to like a -53. Now remember, it's a smart object. If we messed up, we can always go back and change it. So that's kind of nice. And that's all we need to do here. Click OK. That'll send us back into Photoshop. And now we have the reverse clarity over the entire image. So here's what we're going to do. And again, we set ourselves up for success, so we can come up to My Channels, and this time we're going to grab Sky. And all we need to do is click this icon here, so it'll apply that sky mask to that ACR layer. So let's click this, and just like that, check it out, I've smoothed out my sky. Isn't that cool? I mean, really nice. So that was quick. I like the smoothed out sky, but I think it needs a little bit of lightening. And this is the paying attention to detail thing. If you don't think it needs lightening, don't do it. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up to My Channels, go to Sky, and I'll put it to a color grading tool. And then just simply click on this mid-tone block and drag this slider to the right and just lighten up my sky. And here's the before and here's the after. I just think it looks a little more pleasing. It adds to the overall contrast of the image, and I think it really works well. It's a contrast thing. I got the smooth sky, the textured tree. The tree's a little on the darker side, and the sky's on the lighter side, so we're playing with contrast, and that's a beautiful thing. I promise you 2 quick adjustments, and then I'm going to get into that option thing, and you don't want to miss that, so stick with me. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I did this on my last week's tutorial. I'm going to do it again. I feel the midtones just need lighten just a little bit, and this is a golden tip for you. So what you want to do is you want to, let's get out of this color grading tool, you want to come up to your luminosity masks. For this technique, use a mids 1, and I'll put it to a curves adjustment layer. We're not going to use the curve. We're just using that to get a blend mode off it. That's all we're using it for, so I can close this properties panel. And all I want to do is change this to a screen blend mode. And have I used my screen blend mode for something else? I have. So I got to come here. It's up here normally for everybody, but I've used mine for my own action. So I'm going to go ahead and just come here where it says normal and come down to screen. Now it's way too light, but check this out. I'm going to pull back this opacity the whole way off. And all I'm doing is lightening up that mids 1 just a little tiny bit. Like right about there, 46%. Here is the before, and here is the after. Just that little attention to detail. These little things make a lot of difference. One final thing, you got to have a vignette. So come to the actions. I'm just going to go with a regular vignette. And as soon as this comes up here, the Gaussian blur, I'm going to accept that radius, click OK. And here's the before. And here's the after. I don't want my deep shadows getting too dark through the vignette. So what I'll do is double click here. We're going to use blend diff. We're just going to drag the shadow slider out a little bit, and then we're going to split it so it gives us a nice gradient so it doesn't look like it was artificially added like that. It's just going to protect some of the shadows in the corner. So here is the before and here is after. I just want a nice subtle vignette. That's a little too strong, so I'm going to take this opacity and I'm going to take it the whole way off and just build it up very slowly to maybe about 20%. Let's see, before and after. Before and after. Just a subtle vignette. It just keeps you into the frame. And now we are ready to talk about options. I'm pretty happy with this image. You know, I may do some dodging and burning. I always like to do that, but I'm going to forgo that for now because you've seen me do that in the past, and I'll be doing that in future tutorials. For all intents and purposes, I'm going to say this is done right now, and I have all my layers intact, so I can save this. Command or Control S saves it. When you go back into Lightroom, it's there. Now, say we like this color image. There's not a whole lot of color in it, but say we like it, and say we like our subject over here because it shows scale, but we're photographers and we're not so sure if we're sold on it yet, so we want to save it out. But let me show you a really cool button on the CX or combo panel, and that's this duplicate image button here. When you click on this, it duplicates the image. Everything is intact. All your layers are there. Now, for my taste, I'm not a real big fan of this image in color, so I'm thinking black and white. This image screams black and white to me. So I'm going to show you a real quick, fast way of getting a really good black and white conversion, and that is using a gradient map. And we can get the gradient map by clicking on this icon right here. It's real quick with the TK8 plugin. So click this. And when you do, this gradient map property comes up here. Now I'm going to show you something in gradient map, and this is new in the latest versions of Photoshop. Right now is the method is set to classic. There's a drop down here. There's perceptual, which I don't like. It's really dark and it doesn't look good. And then there's linear and it's really flat and it doesn't look good. And then there's classic, which looks really awesome. And for me, that's a great black and white conversion. So there's my second option. We have a color option. We have a black and white option. Let's click duplicate image again. And now for me, this image is screaming out a tight crop. I'm not so sold on the subject over here. I don't like this driftwood over here. I don't think it's necessary. And if it's not necessary, let's get rid of it. So I want to do a crop on this. So I'll do a black and white crop. And to do that, I'm going to get the crop tool. And with the crop tool, make sure you have delete crop pixels unchecked. That way it'll be a non-destructive crop. So once you send this back into Lightroom and you open it up again at some point, you can, and you're not happy with the crop, you can go ahead and change it. Now I'm going to do a freeform crop on this image. And I have it width times height times resolution. I didn't put a resolution in there. I'm just leaving it just the way it is. So I'm going to drag this and start to pull it in. And I'm going to pull it into like right here. And that looks good. And I think I'm going to pull it down from the top a little bit. Maybe right like that. And now I want to get rid of this unnecessary stuff for me anyway. I'm going to pull this in like so. I like the way these branches are going out here. And as far as the bottom's concerned, I like it. I may just, do I want to pull it up? I don't know. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to check this side here. Do I want to pull this over? No, I think I was good. I think it was good right there. I think that's a good crop. Now all we have to do is click this check here, and here it is. And there's one small problem. You'll notice the vignette is cut off on the left side, and that's because I cropped the image. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete this, and I'll reapply it, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, now the vignette has been fixed. Okay, so I want to make one more duplicate image, so I'm going to go ahead and click this again, and I just want to add a nice little like a split toning to it, and I'm going to use the color grading tool to do it, and it works great for this kind of stuff. It's super easy, so I'm going to click on the color grading tool. You must click the plus. This is very important. I'm going to start with the shadows, and I'm just going to add a little bit of blue to the shadows. That's too much. Maybe right about there. I like that. And I'm going to pair that up with, I'm going to go to midtones, and I'm going to go and add a little bit of like a sepia type effect. And now I'll go to highlights, and I'll add a little bit to the highlights, just a little tiny bit. Now, a typical split tone would just have the shadows and the highlights tinted, but I'm also doing the midtones, which I like that effect when you do all three tones. So there it is. Now all we need to do is save these up, but pay close attention here. They all have unique names because the second one, the second image here, the black and white, is Steve Director, blah, 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 copy. The next image is the same thing, only copy 2, TIFF. And the last one is copy 3. So I have 4 unique names. Now I just have to save these back to the exact directory that the first image came from. That's very important, and you'll see why here shortly. The first image where we did all the work on was already saved back into Lightroom because it came from there. This next image will not be found in Lightroom when we go back, and I'll show you how we get it there. Neither will this one or this one. So let's save this one out. What we do is we come up to File, and we want to click on Save As, and you'll notice my file finder opens up. Now make sure it goes back to the original directory that first image came from. It came from this directory for me called Steve Director, so that's very important. I'm saving it out as a TIFF file. All the layers will be intact when I do this. And now all we need to do is click Save. Another dialog box comes up. I use no compression. I'll click OK. And that will save the file out. I went ahead and saved these other 2 files. And now we're going to go into Lightroom, and I'm going to show you that they won't be there, but they will be after I show you what to do. You don't want to miss this. Well, here we are in Lightroom. And like I said, we only see the original DNG and the original edit that we did, because remember, it came from Lightroom, and when I saved it, it automatically will show up in Lightroom. Now, I did save the other 3 files back into this Steve Director folder, but they're not showing up. But here's all you have to do. We just have to let Lightroom know they're there. Right-click on that folder and go to Synchronize folder. Click on that. And when you do, it'll say Import New Photos 3, Synchronize. And you'll see they're going to show up here in a sec or two. And there they are. But now you might be saying, but where are those other 2 images, Dave? I'll show you. Do not fear. Right-click on this image, any of these images. You just right-click and say, go to Folder and Library. And when you do, there they are. Here's our original DNG, and here's the different versions. I'm going to go ahead and select all these images. Not the first one, but I'm going to command-click this one. This one's already selected, and this one. And I'm going to click on this survey mode here. And get rid of the side panels here. And I'll turn the lights out. And now you can see here are our 4 versions. We got our black and white crop toned image up here, the straightforward black and white here, the black and white full image here, and the colorful image here. So now we can look at these and we have these options. And that's what I meant about options. So if we're not yet decided of which direction we want to go, now we can have a good idea of how we want to do it. And sometimes it pays to walk away from it, for an hour, a day, 2 days, and then come back and look at them again. Now, all their layers are intact, so all you need to do is open them back up in Photoshop and do some more editing on them or whatever you want to do. Get rid of the other copies if you don't need them. It's all up to you. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe, click that bell notification icon. Then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll be notified. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly, and I'll see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing.